Thank you for tuning into our podcast. We are coming to you from Chicopee, Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Camille. He offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of the local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, Mass. Now you actually lead these tours and give these presentations yourself, is that correct?
This one was part of the Wyckoff neighborhood tour.
And so today we'll be talking about the Albert Steiger landscapes. So what work did the Olmsted brothers do for Steiger?
Okay, the Olmsteds did a lot of work in terms of design for Albert Steiger. The Olmsted brothers were never actually the contractors, so he had to hire other people. But uniquely, Albert Steiger did his own landscape physically. He got on bulldozers and did it himself with one friend. That was it. He was a doer himself in almost everything he did. Now, he was at 170 Mountain View Drive when he was in Holyoke, and that's one place he did landscapes. And we're going to talk about, what Olmsted did for him, but also about Albert Steiger himself. And then we're going to tell about the lots across the street, and then how many Albert Steiger gates there are in Holyoke. There's more than you think. All right? So, what did the Olmsteds do for Steiger? They built up a beautiful design for the big gates in front of his 140 Mountain View Drive residence. They didn't do the landscape of his house, and so even today it's a very simple place, but the gate in front of it is gorgeous. Designed in the year 1922 and implemented very soon thereafter, it still exists in wonderful shape 100 years later. It's such that you should see it in person, and you should see it on the design plan of the Olmsteds. It's gorgeous, and it's a sweep downwards, and it also sweeps curving inwards. And everything was mathematically done on the design plan. So when you look at the design, it tells you to use this radius of curvature here, use this radius of curvature on this part right here, and it changes because as the terrain changes, they change it. And as the terrain changed, the height of the gate changed. It came sweeping down, so it looked like it blended in with the landscape in the house. It's gorgeous. And it's about, if you total up both sides, it's about maybe 60 feet long, 30 feet on each side. The one on the right side sweeps in at a steep angle in the back. It now is bordered by Steiger Drive, but it didn't used to be. And by changing the street, they also changed the way the water flow. And that wall has suffered a tiny bit more damage, whereas the left-hand side has no damage at all. It's 100 years old, and it looks like it was made yesterday. And if you like mathematical precision, then you'll love this design. You'll love seeing it in person.
So, tell us a bit about Albert Steiger.
Albert Steiger was the owner of the Steiger's department stores. Started first one in around 1898 New York City area in Port Chester. Then the second store was in Holyoke, Massachusetts, 1899. The next one was in Springfield, Massachusetts, around 1902. Then in Fall River, New Bedford, one in Connecticut. So I believe he had 6 stores going at least in his lifetime. Now, he was a person that loved to sell. He would sell at 15 years old. He was selling people items out of his house. He just loved to sell. And he also loved to hike. And everywhere he lived, he had a hiking trail, and if he wasn't one there, he'd make it. He also loved to golf, so every house he made was right next to a golf course. And he also liked being a do-it-himselfer, and he would do projects, including the one from the Olmsted brothers. They made a design from across the street from his house in Holyoke, and he implemented it with one other person being on bulldozers, and he wrote back to the Olmsteds, I did it half the time you told me to, and it took half the material you told me to. And so I'm not going to pay you. But he actually did end up paying the full bill. So he was a very energetic guy, loved walking. I hear a story that he walked up to 6 miles almost every day and golfed almost every day he possibly could when the weather allowed it. So it's great to know this kind of personality is around. He was also, he could be charitable. For instance, one thing he did was that he had land behind his house in Holyoke that went for about a half mile from his house up to East Hampton Road. That's a big hike. And around 1929, he gave a great portion of it to the Holyoke Water Works. And they used it to put a new entrance road in. And they ended up putting a new gate for him, and I'll tell you about that later. So, all he told them to do, he gave it to him for free. He said, just keep it park-like. And since then, it has kept park-like. And so they listened to him.
So quickly before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there he has both videos of the various stops along each tour and also past and present photos of the historical sites throughout as well. And if you're interested in setting up a private tour, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And they are perfect for fun educational outdoor activities for the whole family or for your group parties, especially those special occasions and get-togethers. And getting back to our interview, tell us about the lots across the street from Steiger's home.
All right, so across from 170 Mountain View Drive, there was a 3-lot section that Albert Steiger bought up in 1924, I believe. And he bought it up only because he wanted to keep the neighborhood where the Mount Tom golf course was. He wanted to keep it up in a beautiful look with a nice landscape to it. It was right across from his house, and he made a trail that was only about 120 yards long that went from his house to the first hole on the golf course, so he could get to it very quickly. He put a stone wall up there. He manicured the grounds himself with one partner, and he had the Olmsted brothers design it so it looked good, fit in with the new golf course and fit in with his home's new gate and his home's look. And at the base of this 3-lot section, he also put up a gate from the clubhouse so people could come out of the clubhouse, walk through this little gate, and go upwards to hole number 1. So he loved doing these things to make the area look gorgeous. And when you still go up there, you can still see this area looks gorgeous, but now it's filled up, 3-lot section, but it filled up with 4 homes along the way. And those homes were made after his death when lots were sold, and so most of the homes are from the 1950s.
So, how many Steiger gates are there in Holyoke? Where are they, and who made them?
Okay, there's 3 Steiger gates in Holyoke. The first one was the one he had the Olmsted brothers design for him. That was right in front of his house at 170 Mountain View Drive. That's gorgeous. And it was, I don't know who the contractor was, but it's so well made that it's still in superb shape 100 years later. There's also a Steiger gate that he was made from across from the Mount Tom golf course, which used to be where now there's Briarwood Drive, and the golfers come out of that clubhouse, walk across Mountain View Drive, up through one of his little gates that he had made, and went up to the first hole of the Mount Tom golf course. And I don't know who designed or made that one, but it looks like an Olmsted design gate. It looks like the one in front of his house at 170 Mountain View Drive. It's also on Mountain View Drive itself. So there's 2 on the same street, one very large and one tiny. Now there's one more that he had nothing to do with, and it occurred a year after he died. You remember I told you that he gave land to the Holyoke Water Works, and they made a new entrance road. And at the very top of that entrance road, in 1939, Works Progress Administration, WPA project, made a large Olmsted gate, which was larger than the one even in front of his house. It still exists. It's not in great shape. I wish a Community Preservation Act grant of Holyoke would be used to fix this up. And it's still there. It looks just like the other 2. And the whole drive is called Steiger Drive, going into the White Street Reservoir. It's on the old East Hampton Road. And if you go out there, you'll be amazed how long it is. I paced it off once. I think it's about 140 feet long, right? But it does need some work. Some sections are great, but some are falling apart. Now, we know who made that one. The men on the WPA projects. So there's 3 Steiger gates in Holyoke. All of them are beautiful, and most of them are still in great shape.
So thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours, and we want to thank our listeners again for tuning in. And you can tune into a large selection of our other podcasts and much more on his website. And again, that's holyokecanaltours.org. And you can email Jim directly for private tours or to inquire about anything else at bobcat4214B@yahoo.com. And be sure to check out his upcoming 2024 season tours and more as they become available. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be discussing the Steigers. So, tell us about Albert Steiger.
All right. The man who started Steiger was Albert Steiger. And he started a store first in Port Chester, New York, just above New York City. That was in 1898. He had, as a young boy, really wanted to start up a retail store, and he actually tried to sell things along the way. He sold clothes when he was like 10 years old to people. He was really into retail. And he started a second store in Holyoke on High Street in 1899. The building is still there. It's gorgeous. And we're going to talk about today the evolution of the Steiger buildings because it expanded. And then we're also going to look at the buildings, and you can go there and see how you can distinguish one building from the next. And then what's happened to the Steiger buildings through the years. Now, Albert Steiger wasn't only interested in retail or just Holyoke or just his family. He was interested in, he was an avid hiker, he was an avid golfer. He would expand greatly, so he would have 8 stores by the end. So he'd expand to Fall River, Massachusetts, New Bedford, Massachusetts, to Enfield, Connecticut. In Springfield, he would have his biggest store of all, and other locations. He just loved retail so much. I wouldn't say he was a people person, but part of him was. So he was both a great businessman and a fine addition to the community because he gave a lot to charity. But on the other hand, you would have to be very stern on your people that you hire, because you got to make a profit in a field that's tough to make a profit out of. You'd have to buy good clothes, but get it at a good price. If you don't do so, you're not going to succeed.
And tell us about the evolution of the Steiger building in Holyoke.
Okay, the building evolved with time, and what happened with time was that he would expand from his first location at High Street to the blocks to the left of that original building, and then he would expand to the block to the right of that original building. And so, how is that possible? Because if you look at the store, it all looks the same. Well, that's because he changed the facade of both his purchases into Beaux-Art buildings. And when they were changed, he made it look like the original Beaux-Art that was put on his 1899 section. And so he bought the child's block to the left and changed the facade of that to Beaux-Art. And you know that because it has a fenestration that is quite different. Instead of single or double blocks, it's a triple fenestration window on one of the floors. And also, the top edge of the building has a different look to it architecturally. And when he bought the Woolworth building to its right, he also changed the facade to the Beaux-Art look. And He made it look like the other buildings as best as possible. It was very hard to do, of course. In the interior, he knocked down a wall. So, for instance, the second floor, up all three of those buildings have the walls knocked down, so you can walk from the one to the next very, very easily. Now, if you look at the building, you're going to be able to tell that, yes, there is differences. And besides what I just told you, and we're going to talk about that key thing. But Steiger's itself was a great building. And each of the buildings he got along the way, he would develop. All right, so the first building that he actually bought was the Face Shumway, which he changed over, and then he bought his own building, and he changed that over. Then he bought the Howard apartment block in the back and got rid of all the buildings and made a parking lot only. Then he bought the Childs next to it, which he already had a lease for many years, and he made the facade there. And then the Woolworth happened in 1954. So there was a big gap when he bought the Childs. That was in 1922, but 1954, Steiger's bought the Woolworth. He had died in 1938, so it was his son Chauncey Steiger that had bought up the Woolworth, and again made it look very much like the one next to it. All right, 1984, 5 years after the Holyoke Mall opens, Steiger closes this High Street location, and they move up to the Holyoke Mall, but they have other buildings around the area, of course, Springfield, Hartford, and even in the late 70s, they moved into Enfield. Now, since that point, even the Steigers, the Holyoke Mall, and other locations have closed down or has been put into other businesses that bought them up.
And before we continue with the interview, just to fill listeners in, if you want to find out more information or sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. You'll find videos and podcasts on almost every stop of every tour, and also find photos and text on these historical sites. And if you're interested in a private tour, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com, and they are educational outdoor activities for family or groups. So, getting back to our interview, how can a person tell that this evolution happened?
All right, when you look at the facade, you can see the distinguishing features. The frieze, which is the top edge of the building, is slightly different as you travel along from either left or to right. And for instance, the S on the shield is not there as you travel towards the left. It has emblem that's certainly different. As you travel from right to left, the window fenestration also changing. I mentioned that, but you can also see edge or crack to the vertical change as you go from the original Steigers to the original Childs. Also, the doorways obviously changed, but those have changed a lot anyways. And if you look, you can also see many small details, especially above the second floor, where you have little changes. It just doesn't look right. The actual color of the building is very, very, very slightly different. Now, when you go towards the right, or the old-time Woolworth building, there's a lot of differences there, but the Beaux-Arts look has still its place there. By then, the 50s, it was hard to find workmen who could do Beaux-Arts anymore, but they did a decent job of making it look like it was.
Now, what should be done to improve the Steiger building?
Okay. All right, maybe get more tenants, and they almost all have first floor tenants, like the People's Bank and other retails and institutions. But the upper floors hopefully will get more tenants as you go along. The Holyoke Medical Center down campus has moved to the ground floor of the former Childs building, but all the other floors should be occupied. There's no reason for that. They even lost a tenant last year in the year 2023, Rainbow, that had been there for decades. They moved out, and I had hoped they were selling the whole building, but then they changed the sign from sales to lease. So I don't know what's happening anymore. But the facade is beautiful now, and hopefully that can stay that way. The frieze is gorgeous. The ground floors might have a little improvements, looking like its former self. But hopefully the inside is where the drastic changes come, and hopefully they can change them.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours. And we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And you can tune to a large selection of podcasts and other